cut me short. I'm the captain now.
Hey, welcome, welcome, welcome. How are we all doing? It is me, Legal Vices, and we are here. It is another Maritime Monday. How are we all doing? It's a new week, it's a new time, and here we are for yet another exciting adventure of how everything goes right, everybody is good and decent, and nothing goes wrong on the oceans. Or not. This is another horrible story. Yeah. If any of you have read the description, you'll know it's the usual suspects. Mutiny, greed, problems like that. And again, several hundred deaths. So, all right, that's our cheerful news for the day. We're going to be talking about the SS Arctic today. And of course, before we get going, we have to do the most important thing of the day. It's the daily cocktail, which is, of course, why I was late. And well, I was 1 minute late from the cocktail manufacturing and a few minutes late doing other things in the studio here. But today's cocktail for Maritime Monday is the Irish Storm. Ooh, there we go. Sucks with the background. This is an amazing cocktail that you're not going to want to miss. Again, there's a lot of good shakiness about it. It's a shaken cocktail. There's 40 milliliters of Irish whiskey. Take your pick of Irish whiskey. Go an ounce and a half if you're not in the metric system. Half an ounce of Cointreau or 10 milliliters of Cointreau, 10 milliliters or half an ounce of Aperol, and you're going to want to add half an ounce of lemon juice, fresh squeezed lemon juice, or 15 milliliters of lemon juice, and 1 egg white. What you want to do is you want to put all of the alcohol ingredients into your glass first, put a couple of ice cubes in there, shake it up in your shaker, and then pour the alcohol into another glass, and then add your egg whites. Add your egg whites, and then put the alcohol back in the same glass, and then drop in one of those little protein shakers, or just shake like a mofo. And give it a good shake for 30 seconds. That creates this amazing foam on the top. And then you come up with this amazing drink called the Irish Storm. It's quite a delicious cocktail. It's quite refreshing because it's got the Aperol and the Cointreau in it. And it's got that creamy egg white. Such a good cocktail. That's going to be good. So that's the cocktail we've got up today. Now that that's out of the way, it's time to get down to business with Flux. Flux bringing in the first $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Flux. Okay, here we go. Mocha Dick Poon XOXO, fully adjustable, blow for freedom. This is the only place I don't have to use spaces in the Mocha Dick Poon. Dick Poon. Thank you so much. All right, that's good of you to do that. Thank you so much, Flux. All right, today, our video on the SS Arctic. Before we get talking about anything else, I just wanted to say this comes from a channel called Part-Time Explorer. It's a fairly good-sized channel. He got about 250,000 subscribers. He focuses on historical events with kind of a bent towards maritime issues. So there's a lot of maritime disasters, a lot of historical maritime things on his channel, and this is a great video. It's not too short. It's not too long. It's very well produced. And again, it's much better than anything I could come up on my own. So I hope he doesn't mind me using this video because it's totally done completely out of respect for the amazing quality of videos that he puts out. And I would encourage all of you to go to Part-Time Explorer. That's Part-Time Explorer. Go to his channel, subscribe, read it. Read what he's got written there. Watch the videos, like things, like this video. The link is down there below. Go there and just let him know that Legal Vices sent you, and we appreciate him making this amazing quality video for us to learn more about the disaster. That would be deeply appreciated if you would do that. Because yeah, we don't like to upset people that do things better than I do, and one of them is produce videos. So out of deep care and respect for the Part-Time Explorer channel, thank you so much. And maybe let's do a collab. I'd love to have you on, which is what we're going to be doing with some of our other channels that we've had on. As I mentioned before, the Retired Afloat guys are going to be here on May 8th. and he's got another video out. Remember we did the Penley lifeboat disaster several months ago. He just released a video on that, which is really powerful. So I want to talk to him about the Shackleton expedition, and then maybe do another deep dive again on this Penley lifeboat disaster. That it was really, really insightful and actually quite emotional. So I appreciate that. Let's jump into today here. Oh, we got a new old face here. Where'd we go? Where'd that go? Farron on TV. Long time no see. Love the new background. We need to do some of the unexplained in the near future. Crazy new conspiracies I've found. Keep up the great work, friend. Thank you so much. It's a long time no see, Farron. Good to have you here. Yeah, this is just a temporary thing to see if I like the background or not for Maritime Monday. I usually hate green screens, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. People think it was okay last week, so tried a different one this week. We'll just see. I don't like how it moves in it. But anyway, enough about what I don't like. What I do like is this. But thank you so much for that super chat, Farron. It's been a minute. You shaved your chin. Well, not on purpose. This was an accident. This was an accident. I was trimming it up to look nice on Saturday, and kind of had a shaving accident. And yeah, trying to balance it out, it didn't work. So I just kind of had to do the full dig. And see, I hate shaving enough. One, because this just makes me look like Wilford Brimley. Got diabetes. But also because it's got this one spot of brown right here. I guess right over here. There's one spot of brown here, and there's one spot of brown right here, which just looks weird. Looks like I've got some kind of weird rash on my face, but it's just a little brown thing. This hasn't happened to me in about 4 years. It was just I was in a hurry, and yeah, things happen. So there we are. I'll have to look like an idiot for another week or so, but yeah, we'll be good. We'll be good in about a week. Flux says, I thought you looked a little funny. Well, gee, thanks, Flux. Go away. All right. This is a rather intense video. So let's get all of our light jokiness out of the way, because it's gonna get rough. It's gonna get rougher than anybody wants to see happen again, because it's just one disaster after another. So I can't wait to wait. I mentioned before that we're going to have a lieutenant commander from the Coast Guard who does helicopter rescues. He's going to be on here hopefully soon. It's an acquaintance of Steve Gosney, so I'm going to we're working on that, trying to get him on here, get things scheduled. So we'll have that, and I have somebody else lined up. Maritime Mondays are going to be fun for the next month or so. All right, we have our like and subscribe poll. So 251 of you here now and 184 likes. Please hit that like button. Please hit the subscribe button. If you have already subscribed, please make sure that you are still subscribed. And if you're not, please resubscribe. I'm just checking to see how we're doing on the quest to get back up to 36,000. We're not doing too bad. We are at 35,990. So we're 10 away from the 36,000 mark again. Huzzah. No cannibalism this week, unfortunately, but there was almost cannibalism. Does close cannibalism count? We'll have to see. Take our like and subscribe poll after you've done that. We got 192 likes and only 178 votes. Some of you haven't hit the like button. Some of you haven't voted. Get over there and vote. Today, the selections are pretty lame. I apologize for that in advance. Well, not in advance. It's already up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm the liker and subscriber now. And yes, it was a titanic decision. And a sinking feeling told me I forgot. And okay, now paint me one of your French Loraxes. All right, that's the lame poll. Do that, take that. That's just there to remind you that there is a like poll and there is a like button. So, all right. What is the SS Arctic all about? Well, it was a ship, and some of this little background we're going to go over is going to be reiterated in the video. So I'll try not to do too much overlapping material, but it was built in 1850. Well, it was completed in 1850, and it was a 2,856 ton paddle steamer. It was owned and part of the Collins line. They were the big competitor of the Cunard line. And it was in service for 4 years. It was one of the fastest. It was one of the fastest ships out there. It was very, very luxurious. But 4 years later, on September 27th, while on a passage from New York to Liverpool, it had a little bit of a collision. And there's some very important things that happened on that ship, which led to the deaths of more than 300 people. We'll stop and we'll talk about that as it goes on. But the first shipping line to begin the regular transatlantic steamer services was Cunard Line from Britain, and they mainly care like mail and passengers and whatnot, and they received some subsidies from the British government and from the United States Post Office. The Postal Department was paying a British company to take the mail across the ocean. But Americans thought, hey, you know what? Maybe an American line should benefit from these government subsidies. So enter Edward Knight Collins. He successfully bid for this mail service between the US to Europe, and he established the Collins Line and began this ambitious steamship construction program. And there were 2 shipyards, the William H. Brown and the Jacob Bell shipyards. They were contracted to build 2 large wooden paddle steamers to be used by Collins in this regular twice monthly transatlantic mail service. And they would get an annual subsidy of about $385,000 a year from the U.S. government. Well, along comes there was several ships. There was the Arctic, the Atlantic, the Pacific. They were some of the main ones. And one of these days, we'll get around to telling you about the tragic accident involving the SS Atlantic. But we're just talking about the sister ship, the Arctic, today. Not a lot of good press for the Collins Line back in the day. They had several accidents. Anyway, the Arctic was launched, as I said, in 1850. And she was quoted as being the most stupendous vessel ever constructed in the United States or the world since the patriarchal days of Noah. That's kind of a little bit hyperbolic, but yeah, that's the most stupendous vessel since Noah's Ark is basically what it was. And when it slipped into the water, quote, men waved their hats, ladies their handkerchiefs in admiration of the glad event. The thousands who witnessed her launch stood for nearly half an hour contemplating the splendid vessel. Her captain was James F. Lewis. And, you know, there's some problems with this vessel. It was involved in a few incidents. This one vessel, again, mind you, this thing was only around for about 4 years. About 4 years. Launches in 1850. It underwent its sea trials during October 18th and 19th. The sea trials are the last testing before you deliver the ship to the new owner. That's where you go over it from stem to stern, top to bottom. You check everything out. You run it on a few test runs, and you make sure there's no problems with it. Then you deliver it to the buyers. So the first voyage was to Liverpool. No problem. But although it had established its reputation as being one of the fastest ocean liners out there, and it was going from the U.S. to Liverpool in about 10 days. That's pretty darn quick back then. Well, she had a problem in 1853. She ran aground on the Burbo Bank in Liverpool Bay whilst on a voyage from New York to Liverpool. So they had to refloat her. They took her into Liverpool. And then again on May 1854, she struck Black Rock off the coast of the Salty Islands while on a voyage from Liverpool to New York. Then she was refloated. She was given new engines in 1854. And then in September of 1854, this accident happened. So she already had 2 groundings in 4 years. And then they put these new engines. They were bigger, faster, more. What's the word I'm looking for in English? I hate this when I forget English words. More efficient engines. So they would cut the fuel costs by half, but these engines were so powerful that it was putting strain on the hulls, and it was causing them a lot of expenses to keep the vessel maintained. Of course, there were women aboard Leafy Fifi Foo. It's a passenger ship. So yeah, this was the background, and this leads us up to today. Not too much of what we've covered is overlapped in the video, but I wanted to give you this kind of a background on the company, the people involved, and the history. I mean, 3 accidents in 4 years is not a great statement for the ship or the company that runs them. Now we've got one super chat to get through here from Nicholas Starov, Union Rep, Labor Law, Close Cannibalism. What? PJs, pajamas. No, there was no pajamas there, Nicholas. Yeah. All right. So let's get into this. Sit back and enjoy the story of the disastrous sinking of the SS Arctic. And again, that's on the go to the channel, Part-Time Explorer. The link to the main channel is down below, as well as the link to this video without my commentary. So if you want to just watch it clean for what it is, go there and do that. But you should go there and like it anyway and say that I sent you and that we appreciate his hard work preparing these wonderful videos for our continued education and consumption. And as you can see, he's titled this The Terrible Disaster of the SS Arctic. It wasn't just a disaster, it was a terrible disaster. Again, resulting in the death of approximately 320 people. Let's go.
This is not a story for the faint of heart. It is violent.
That's a great way to start out, isn't it? It just kind of lets you know where we're going.
Violent, graphic, and disturbing. We've studied the Titanic. We've studied the Atlantic, the Swallow, the Lexington, the Lusitania. Although this wreck might not have the same high numbers of casualties as the others, the absolute hell that unfolded during this ordeal is one of the worst I've ever studied.
Yeah. And again, if you look at my description of this case here is literally a classic example of and we've done this a lot of times, some of these things where you think it just can't get any worse. This is legitimately a case where it was just one thing after another, after another, after another. It's literally the embodiment of nothing more can happen after this. And speaking of the embodiment of weird things, we have the Let's Go Brandon. Thank you so much for the super chat. What's up with the gay green screen? Where are the dogs? This is not that type of a green screen. This is an artist's rendition of the vessel approaching the island of Ryla in the Cthulhu mythos. So yeah, it's a Lovecraftian background. But where are the dogs? The dogs are just kind of chilling out here. I'm not doing the countdown to doggo cam because I was told that was crass and nobody liked it. So we'll just turn on the doggo cam when we reach the goal we're not supposed to talk about. So let's go.
This is the Arctic, the third ship built for the Collins Line. She was launched in January 1850 and sailed her first voyage in October that same year. She was fast, capturing the title Clipper of the Seas as she claimed the blue ribbon. The Collins Line had well-built ships and great crew, and often were the heroes of the sea. In 1852, one of the ships, the Pacific, saved 16 from the wreck of the Jesse Stevens as it
Hey, I'll tell
sank
you
in a
what.
storm.
Do you guys want to watch the video too? Or you just want to sit here and watch me drink my delicious cocktail? I don't know. If you ask nice, I'll let you guys watch the video too. I'm watching it now. It's pretty darn good. I swore to God I would not do this again because this happens every single damn time. All right. Seeing how you all asked so nicely and called me so many nice names, we'll let you all watch. So this lets me have their X dollars to make me lose clothes without people complaining, but we can't have doggo countdown. Intercourse that noise. All right. Well, we can put this up, but you know, people were complaining last time, so we'll just leave it here, and then all right, we're there. Doggo cam countdown activated. Now you guys can see the video, so let's get back. Jesus. Right. Okay then. Let's go, Brandon, with the $201 because $202 would just be asking too much. Wow. So okay, so I was watching that stream and well, I'll take that. That's why it was $201 because D Watt gave $200 for the super chat crown last time. All right. So let's go. Brandon gets it with $201. So I was watching that stream, and we'll take the super chat crown back as well. Pour a shot and fire up the dog camera. All right. Well, we can do both of those things. Oh dear. All right. We got to get to this show sometime, but hey, I'm not gonna be complaining. Thank you so much for that, Flux. Jeff, we're just staring at your chin nudity. It's not really nudity. It's got a close shave. It's got like about a 3-day growth. It's like when you shave and then you just don't shave for a couple days. Thanks, Flux. All right, well, let's get this going. Then we'll rustle up the pig dogs and we'll turn ye oldie camera on. All right, we'll let this play during the part that you missed that I saw, and then I have to go get a drink as well for Brandon. All right, here's the video. I'll be right back.
This is the Arctic, the third ship built for the Collins Line. She was launched in January 1850 and sailed her first voyage in October that same year. She was fast, capturing the title Clipper of the Seas, as she claimed the blue ribbon. The Collins Line had well-built ships and great crew, and often were the heroes of the sea. In 1852, one of the ships, the Pacific, saved 16 from the wreck of the Jesse Stevens as it sank in a storm. But the company had a massive weight around their neck. Politicians in Washington, D.C., many of whom wanted to see the company fail, gave them the impossible requirement of always steaming at full speed, no matter what the weather conditions were, which often put the ships into harm's way. The Arctic was successful at first, but things took a sharp turn for her after she grounded in 1853. She then struck a rock in 1854, and then she had her engines overhauled. But the new engine strained her hull pretty badly. The Arctic...
Yeah, so as I was saying, that new engine that they put in just a few months before the accident was actually causing a lot of damage that they had to stress on the structure, so they had to continually be spending lots of money to maintain that. And glitch in the doggo cam, we'll have to sort that out. But thank you so much. We're keeping in the Irish tonight. We'll do a big old double shot there of the Redbreast 12, courtesy of Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. And I'm not going to take the video away because I won't put it back on. All right, hang tight.
Arctic was a wooden paddle steamer. She had a first class, known as saloon class, and a second class. There was no steerage on board. Her accommodations in second class were comfortable, but her first class was lavish, with 2 grand saloons, one for dining and one for lounging. The Arctic was 2,856 tons, 284 foot long, with a 45-foot beam. She had one funnel with a red top, 2 masts, and 6 lifeboats, 4 hanging on davits, and 2 stowed on the deck. She was capable of flying canvas and navigating as a sailing ship, as her sister famously did in 1851 after her engines were disabled. The Arctic left the Liverpool landing stage in the morning of September 20th, 1854. On board were a few people of note, at least for the time. Most prominent were the families of several important figures in the Collins line. The owner of the Collins line was a
See, now this is something that's interesting to note, is how many important people and their families were on this ship at the time of the accident. And this guy looks like Ron Perlman. Yeah, there were wealthy people, important people, as well as their family members on this particular voyage.
man named Edward Collins. He was not on board, but his wife Mary and 2 of his children, Henry and Mary, were traveling in saloon class. The family of James Brown, the president of the bank that financed the Collins line, was also on board, though, like Edward Collins, he himself was not on board. George Allen, the attorney for the Novelty Iron Works, which built Arctic's engines, was traveling on board with his family and infant. These 3 families all knew each other and kept close together. A few others of interest were on board. The French Duke of Gramont, traveling to Washington, D.C. as a diplomat, and a sea captain.
Yeah, there was a French Duke on there, and as you'll see a little bit later, the French Duke is the cause of a little bit of controversy.
Traveling as a passenger aboard the Arctic, a man named Captain Pratt and his wife and child. Interestingly, only a few months prior, Captain Pratt and his family survived another shipwreck and considered themselves blessed to be here on this sturdy ship. A children's book publisher named Malin Day, and an English architect and painter named Frederick Catherwood. At the command of the Arctic is a seasoned sea captain, Captain James Luce. Captain Luce's son Willie was 11 years old and had suffered from an unidentified illness.
And this is not a new captain. Captain Luce was incredibly experienced. He was 59 years old, I believe, and he had 40 years experience at sea. So, he was very, very, very experienced in what he did. And again, we don't know what his son was suffering from, but his son was suffering from some sort of disability.
Whole life. For the first time ever, Captain Luce and his wife agreed that it may do Willie good to let him travel to Europe with his father, and he was now making his return voyage with him. Captain Luce's wife was staying home. Of the 20 or so people that I've specifically mentioned, only 3 would survive the ordeal. Arctic was carrying 233 passengers and 175 crew, for a total of 408 souls on board. The voyage itself was mostly uneventful. Passengers socialized and fine food was eaten. Music was played and fresh autumn air was breathed on the deck. But as the ship entered the mid-North Atlantic, temperatures dropped and few passengers were willing to go outdoors. Captain Luce's son Willie spent much of the voyage in his cabin, but spent a considerable amount of time with Millie Brown, of the previously mentioned family of James Brown. Arctic plowed through the waves at 13 knots, or around 15 miles per hour, as she approached the Grand Banks off of Newfoundland. Meanwhile, a tiny ship made of iron departed Newfoundland, bound for France.
Yeah. Part of this, which is talked about a little bit later, I believe, is that the owners wanted to keep their reputation and their position as one of the fastest vessels around. So they were instructed that regardless of the weather, regardless of conditions, they were supposed to keep the engines at full speed all the time. And you know what can happen. And predictably, those are the things that happen when you start putting your own desires, your own care, your own greed, your own selfishness over the lives of others. Let's go, Brandon. Take the dollars to dog camera. Oh, yeah. All right. Fine. We'll do that. You surprised me. Boop. All right. There you go. Thank you so much for that super chat, reminding me of all the other super chats. Deeply appreciated. Set a course for another ship, maximum warp. Well, the other ship kind of came at them, but here we are. Let's listen to the story of the other ship, the ironclad ship meeting the wooden ship.
This ship belonged to a French fishing company and was used by the company to transport their fishermen between work in Newfoundland and their homes in France. This ship, with over 150 on board, was named the Vesta. Vesta was 250 tons and stretched half the length of the Arctic at 152 feet in length. In addition to being made of iron, she was ahead of her time in having a propeller instead of paddle wheels and sails on her masts to aid her, and she was divided into 4 watertight compartments.
That's an important part of the situation for this ship. As we've talked about with other ships that recently, this ship had no isolating compartments. Just the whole bottom. There was no way to create watertight areas in case one area was breached. So one hole floods the entire ship. Unlike the other ship, where they could section off parts of the vessel and keep it afloat, basically.
On the second day of her voyage, she was now sailing into the same area that the Arctic was, just off of the east coast of Newfoundland. September 27th was a foggy, cold day.
Yeah, you got to get that mail there quickly, don't you? You got to get the mail there. You want your $385,000 a year subsidies. You better get that mail there quick. Full speed ahead.
Arctic's captain did not wish to be traveling at full speed with such sporadic visibilities, but he was required by the politicians giving the Collins Line their subsidies. It was now 1:15 noon, local time, when out of the fog ahead came a dark ship under full sail and full steam.
Now, fog is a problem, obviously, because visibility is severely reduced. And there are steps now that you take to make sure that you're not going to be doing this, but accidents still do happen. But now you do things like sound your whistle every couple of minutes. You have your radar, you have your radio. They didn't have this stuff back then. It was just all visual and sound. And there's no indication of any notifications to each other in the fog. Just imagine you're sitting there minding your own business, and then you see this ship that's half the size of yours coming out of the fog at you. Or imagine you're on the other ship, where you just suddenly see the broadside of a ship twice as big as you in front of you,
closing in on them at least 10 knots. It was the French fishing steamer Vesta. A lookout aboard the Arctic called the alert, "Stop, steamer ahead."
When you're this close, when you're coming out of the fog, really there's not a lot you can do to avoid the collision at this point. You can just hope to make it slightly less than it should be. And this is a pretty high speed accident too. You got one going at 12, 13 knots and one going at 10 knots. And they're going to meet right about here.
Officer on the bridge had only a moment to decide if he was going to turn the ship to the left or to the right. Now, turning to the left. Okay, what do you do?
Okay, now stop. Okay, what would you do? Which way would you go? You have two options. You can turn to the right, you can turn to the left. What happens if you turn to the left? Well, first of all, you hope that the other guy would turn to the left as well. And it kind of gives you maybe a little more room to avoid. But if you turn right, perhaps we'll let him explain here. But this is a choice. And now there's actually rules that say, if at all possible, you should avoid making turns to port. You should port is the left side. So unless you can't avoid it, you should avoid turning left.
Quicker way out of ship to the left or to the right. Now, turning to the left was the quicker way out of danger, but it broke the standard passing protocol for ships in that they should always pass each other on the right. It also required the captain of the Vesta to act.
Yeah, they call that port to port. It's sort of the way we in the West drive. You drive on the right side of the road. You pass each other with your left side, your port side, to the other ship's port side. So you pass with your left side to your left side. So you go on the right side. That's the principle of shipping. You should pass with your left sides together. But this is more of a crossing situation.
Each other on the right. It also required the captain of the Vesta to act accordingly and not attempt to pass on their own right, which would simply put them right back into the path.
That's the big danger of turning left, turning to port right there. Is he's going to turn, he's going to say, aha, there's another ship. We're supposed to pass port to port. So we need to turn right. So he turns right, the ship turns left, and this red arrow happens. That is the danger of one ship turning to port without the other ship knowing what they're doing.
Path of the Arctic. The officer shouted hard to starboard, which, believe it or not, means turn the ship to port.
Yeah, that was. Thankfully, they've by and large done away with this. When you go hard to starboard, back then they were talking about the keel, and if the keel turns to starboard, that turns the ship to port. It's backwards. It's sort of like counter steering. But now when they say turn to port, you turn to port. You turn to the left. When they say turn to the right, you turn to the right. Not put the keel to the right so you turn left. We decided that got a little bit confusing and we changed those things.
It's the inverse of what you might expect. It's called tiller commands. Arctic's engines were ordered to stop, and at least her port side engine was stopped within a moment, with the engineers rushing up on deck to find out what was up as soon as their orders had been executed. Arctic was slowly beginning to pull to her port, but the crew of the Vesta, perhaps in panic.
That's what she chose. She chose to turn to port. She chose to turn left. And of course, if the other people had anything to think about, they're going to be thinking, why the hell is she turning to left? What are we going to do?
Resorted to what was known procedure and did not react in the way that Arctic's crew had hoped for.
Yep. That right there is the problem with going against the rules of the road, going against accepted practice. In a moment of oh my God, we have to avoid this accident as quickly as possible, turn to port, you violate the rules of the road. You violate what the other guy is expecting. And they don't know what you're doing because you start making the turn to port quite, well, I won't say quite a while, but a decent amount of time before the ship actually begins to turn. So when you see these two ships coming at each other, one guy goes, oh my God, there's a ship, we're going to be in a collision. I'm going to turn to starboard the way we're supposed to because we hope this other guy will keep the rules. But if this other guy doesn't do what he's supposed to do or what he's expected to do without telling the other ship, well, you get the one guy that's going against what he should do and the one guy that's doing what he should do, and that leads to this situation. Yeah, well, Katie says zigged when he should have zagged. As long as both ships zig, you're okay. As long as both ships zag, you're okay. But when you're supposed to zig and you expect the guy to zig, so you zig and he zags, then you're screwed, which is what happened here.
The Vesta turned to pass on the right, pointing the Vesta right at the turning Arctic. Had they turned to port and complemented the maneuver of Arctic's crew, they might have avoided disaster. A further order of full astern was given, but not carried out fast enough. Captain Luce emerged on deck by the starboard paddle box.
Yeah, and this command to go full astern, I mean, it's not, that's to go backwards. it's not like a car where you can just like go full on, Fast and Furious and just jam your car into reverse or use your handbrake to spin out. It's inertia, baby. You go full astern with your engines and you still have to slow down to stop and then go back. But it was a last ditch effort to slow down. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes it makes it worse.
Out fast enough. Captain Luce emerged on deck by the starboard paddle box just in time to see the Vesta tear into the starboard bow of the Arctic, just above the waterline. The bowsprit of the Vesta stabbed through the Arctic's wooden hull into the crew quarters and impaled one of the sailors.
Yuck. Yeah. That big, giant, spiky bow just lanced one of the sailors. Ikiv Naris, thank you so much for the super chat, is a former second officer piloting a 90,000-ton cruise ship on the Alaskan Panhandle. Traffic situations like this were very common. It was a nightmare. I imagine it would be around the Alaskan Panhandle because you have a lot of cruise ships there, as well as a lot of fishing ships, fishing vessels, and a lot of oil tankers in that area, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, you've got a crowded area, and this is see, that's the thing. I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to bring I know I've talked about this book a million times, not to exaggerate, but I've talked about it a million times. This big giant book I have in my office called Collisions at Sea: How. I want to bring that, and maybe like when we start to run out of stories to tell, we can go and review stories in this book. We can review cases in this book. But it's all about how ships in the middle of the ocean like this can run into each other, because there's it's a huge ocean, but it's like the road. There's highways where most of the ships will travel. There's these sea lanes, the shipping lanes, where the vast majority of the ships will go due to currents, that are favorable currents, favorable winds, the trade winds and whatnot, and or as I guess is Ikivarnis, however you want me to pronounce that, is when you get around the areas that are heavily traveled by cruises and the oil tankers and the fishing boats, it can get really congested. The problem here in Korea is there's a huge merger of commercial vessels and fishing vessels. So you'll get like these big giant 90,000-ton ships that will roll straight over the top of a little 25, 30-ton fishing boat. And honest to God, will never even know they hit it. The ship is just so big that it doesn't even register that they just ran over the top of another ship. And vice versa. This is a weird thing. And maybe as a former second officer, Ikivarnis can attest to this. But sometimes you can get these huge, like these oil tankers, or these, the very large, oil carriers or ore carriers and whatnot. These amazing, gigantic ships sometimes can be so big that a smaller ship can't see it. I know that makes no sense whatsoever, but at night, this ship can be just so big that you don't see it. Because you would literally have to be like looking up to see the lights and whatnot. And I've had several cases, not so many now, but 15, 20 years ago, where fishing boats would just run straight into the side of a ship because they didn't see it, because it was so big. It was just black. It was just blank in front of them. And so there's all kinds of problems that can happen. And this just happened to be a sad situation where two ships came out of the fog at each other, and one turned to port, one turned to right, one turned to starboard. And we're going to talk more about this next week. I've already got next week's Maritime Monday lined up. I don't know if you remember, while we were watching last month, I think we were watching some random videos, and there was a very close call between two Navy ships that we just watched it and we walked over it. But now they've released the final accident investigation. It's kind of one of those Navy things, or the military things, or the government things. I believe it's called the final initial report, but they've released that report. So we're going to talk about that report. We're going to talk a little bit more about these rules of the road. They didn't exist so much back then in a formal manner, but now they have they're called the COLREGs, the collision regulations. There's like a whole big official. It's like the 1972 something another for the collision regulations for avoiding and preventing accidents at sea, or some big long title. They just call them the COLREGs. We'll talk a little bit more about the COLREGs, which are the rules of the road for ships, next week. But for this, yeah, you can have lots of. Oh, Ike Ivarnas. Okay, that makes sense, actually. But we were lit up like a Christmas tree. Yeah, the cruise ships, they have a lot more lights than, say, the big giant tankers and things. Yeah, the tankers and fishing boats were hard to spot in the dark. Right. This is literally, a dangerous. It's a dangerous thing that these people have to do to entertain people on cruises and to get your power to you, to get your goods to you. And this here was trying to get their mail and passengers to England. And they just kind of met this other ship in the fog. And really, really bad things are just about to happen.
Vesta's foremast collapsed, yanked by its stays as her bow was crushed in and shredded. Vesta was violently twisted and rented from the hole she had created in the Arctic as the Arctic continued to steam forward. The Vesta was trampled as Arctic pushed forward with...
Now, see, we're good right up to this point. Like I said, it's just you smashed the Vesta smashed through the near the bow of the ship, impaling one of the sailors, and then it just starts to scratch down the side. But the problem is you have these giant paddle wheels that stick out from the sides of the ship. And those are literally just these giant crushing wheels that are moving through the water, paddling your way through the water. And once you start getting caught in those, you start getting chewed up.
Vesta dislocating Arctic's hull plates all the while. She was smashed into the forward part of Arctic's paddle box, breaking off the wooden bumper around it known as the guard, and dislocated some of the paddle box frame. Arctic's forward momentum was virtually unchecked by the damage, and she continued coasting forward. Aside from those in the immediately damaged area of the bow, the collision felt like little more than a bump.
See, and this is what I was talking about. You can be so big or be going so fast that you don't feel the accidents. And that's what happens when I'm investigating these accidents for ship owners, for the big commercial container carriers or whatever. When they hit it can be anywhere from 25 tons to 100-ton fishing vessel or a 200-ton fishing vessel. Literally, these people that are in these giant ships will say, I don't know if we hit them or not. Because of course the Coast Guard and the port, they call them the VTS. They're basically like the port radar people that work for the government. It's like the government port management system, the vessel tracking system is what it is. They will say, okay, this ship and this ship cross paths here. And so the Coast Guard will go and find the ship that was involved in the collision of this smaller thing, and they'll be interrogating and questioning the crewmen, and they'll be saying, I don't know. We didn't hit anything that I know of. I didn't feel anything. I didn't hear anything. Because it's just the size differential. This, I don't know. The Vestas was half the size of this ship, so I don't know why they wouldn't have felt something that was half the size of them smashing into the side of the ship. But virtually everyone that survived and talked about this said that they didn't realize there was a collision.
A shock scarcely more than a tremor or a quiver. Leaning over the railing to conduct a hasty inspection, Arctic's crew noted that most of the damage appeared to be above the waterline. Captain Luce ordered a handful of the crewmen to go below and see the extent of the damage and to determine if she was still watertight. For the most part, though, the Arctic appeared to be safe. On board the Vesta, however, it was a scene of absolute carnage. Passengers had been torn apart, and the forward end of the Vesta was now painted in blood.
Yeah, so this is an interesting thing. Watch what happens. So the Arctic is perfectly fine. They're still going. They barely even noticed this. They said, "Oh crap, that sucks." Didn't feel much. They're doing good, but the Vesta, that the front end is ripped off. People are dead and screaming, and the front of the ship is coated in blood. He's saying. But something very, very interesting happens. But before we get there, Marv White says sub, checked, stream, liked. Nothing cool to say. Well, thank you very much. Captain Loose, lip sync ships. Now, Captain Loose, stay tuned for more on him.
The fishermen aboard screamed as the ship dipped forward. Although Vesta's captain tried to control the situation, a lifeboat was launched against his orders with 12 men on board and made all due haste for the Arctic, which...
All right. So what's wrong with that picture? Just wait. It gets better. So a lifeboat from this ship. They weren't authorized. They weren't told to. Against the orders, they launch a ship. And they were trying to get over here to the other ship, to the Arctic. Against orders, all men
appeared safer. As the Vesta drifted away the fog behind the Arctic, Captain Loose saw the Vesta dropping rapidly in the water. He saw the exposed cargo hold and saw the sea pouring in. He heard the men aboard the Vesta crying out for help. Loose ordered Arctic's engines re-engaged and for the ship to begin to round slowly to starboard and double back to assist those aboard the sinking Vesta.
Which is a great thing. This is a very good thing that Captain Loose did. Could have kept going, could have saved himself, could have tried to save things, but he came around to help this other ship that was clearly and obviously sinking. Let's go, Brandon, giving us the unicorn. Give us a unicorn sticker. Thank you. Let's go, Brandon. So they're coming around to help because they see that the other ship is sinking.
Loose ordered the lifeboats cleared so that they may assist the Frenchmen as they abandoned the Vesta, and ordered Chief Officer Gorley and Second Officer Ballum to lower away and take command of 2 of Arctic's lifeboats, making way towards the Vesta. Gorley got his boat into the water first, while Second Officer Ballum had delays with getting his boat launched. Meanwhile, the Arctic came round as the Vesta came back into view. Gorley rowed over to them. By this time, the excitement had drawn nearly every passenger on deck, who crowded the Arctic's starboard railing. So many dozens of them crowded the side of the ship that the Arctic actually leaned a few degrees to starboard.
Now is the beginning of the really bad problems. They had the accident. They don't think there's much damage to their ship. They've got the other ship sinking. They're launching 2 of their very valuable lifeboats to go over and help the people on the other ship. And then there's gawkers. Even before they had cameras on phones, they had gawkers. Everybody's coming on deck to gawk at the ship. All 400 people or whatever are gawking. So many that, as he said, the ship actually starts to lean a few degrees towards the starboard side. Then things happen.
Captain Loose struggled to shout his orders over the murmur of the crowd, but there was no sort of panic. Chief Officer Gorley's boat began putting some distance between her and the Arctic, as Second Officer Ballum's boat finally began lowering from the davits. Arctic's paddles chopped through the water at a slower pace, as the ship cautiously orbited the settling Vesta. But there was something off about the sound of the paddles. The sound of the churning was ever so slightly deeper.
So remember when they first made that collision, it ripped off part of the bumper covering the paddle wheel. And so now Captain Loose is starting to hear some things go wrong. The paddles just don't quite sound right.
No one would have noticed this but her captain, attuned with every sound of his ship. The paddles were slowly becoming deeper and deeper in the water. Luce shouted
So, okay, so why is that? So the captain has noticed that the ship is getting a little lower in the water. The paddles are digging deeper into the water. What could possibly be causing that?
for Second Officer Balaam to abort his lifeboat's launch and come back aboard. He did so and was immediately ordered to re-inspect the bow. Balaam grabbed one of the firemen on the deck who was on his lunch break, and both climbed over the rail to ascertain the extent of the damage. They were shocked, actually, to see the bow of the Vesta still impaled in the Arctic. And
All right. Yes, Joe Choi, they're taking on water. They said they lowered the firemen. And guess you had to have firemen when we were dealing with steam engines in a wooden ship. So the firemen are lowering down somebody over the side of the ship here. And what they see is the bow of the other ship, the front end of the other ship, still stuck inside their hull
and hanging from the mangled hull. There were 3 holes torn in the side, 2 of which were below the waterline.
That right there is the problem. They thought there wasn't that much damage to the ship, but what they didn't see is there were 2 holes punched through the hull beneath the waterline. So for this entire time, it took them to go and to slowly bring themselves around, to come back towards the Arctic, to launch the lifeboats, to notice there's a problem, to call one of the lifeboats back. They had been taking on water the entire time through 2 holes that they knew nothing about.
And letting the sea in. Not only was Vesta going down, but the Arctic was starting to as well. Captain Luce gave 3 orders in quick succession. First, to activate the ship's pumps to start draining the water on board. Second, to plug the holes from the inside with cargo and mattresses. And third, to lower a canvas sail over the hole from the outside. The pumps came on almost in an instant, spraying seawater all over the deck and down off of the sides. The other 2 orders both failed miserably. The damage was now too far below the water for her crew to plug from the inside, and the canvas sail tore apart from the jagged wood as it was lowered over the hull. At this point, Luce had no other means of saving his ship, and Arctic, like nearly every other ship in history until 1912, did not have enough lifeboats for all on board.
Yeah, that was a thing. You just kind of had a number of lifeboats for whatever. There was no real regulations regarding how many lifeboats you had to have. Another famous accident sort of changed that, where they decided that after this other accident, you had to have approximately, I think it was 75% capacity, like 70. You had to have lifeboats sufficient for, I believe it was 75% of the passengers on the ship, which still sounds pretty weird, doesn't it? You don't have to have lifeboats for 100% of the people on your ship, just 75%. The other 25% can get wrecked, I guess. I believe it was 75%, but the ship that really changed this idea that, hey, we need more lifeboats was the unknown accident that called the Titanic. Yes, that's it. That's right. It was the Titanic. The Titanic was the accident that really changed this requirement. Yes, this is the sister ship. You mean the Atlantic? Yeah. These things happen. So yeah, it was basically the Titanic that really solidified this change to making sure you have more lifeboats. Ocean Way, Olympia, you mean? Okay, conspiracy theorists. You're turning the frogs gay.
Newfoundland was 4 hours away, and was Arctic's only hope. As Arctic prepared to make a mad dash toward land, Luce ordered the crew to signal Chief Officer Gorley's boat to return in all due haste. But
okay, this is what they're going to do. They say, oh my God, we're taking on water. We've got 4 hours. to get where we need to go. So they're going to tell this other sinking ship, sorry, we're out of here. Get this lifeboat back here. We're going to be making tracks. We've got to save ourselves.
But it had disappeared into the fog. Arctic's crew put up full steam, turned due west, and prayed. They left Gorley's boat behind, but Luce was convinced that Gorley would pull through somehow. But no.
So yeah, they didn't even wait for that lifeboat to get back. They're like, he'll be good. He's still floating. In the middle of the ocean, away from everybody, with no radios, nothing, no way to contact anybody else, just sort of kind of hanging out there, watching the other ships sink.
No, Gorley and his men were never seen again. Arctic had left Vesta behind too, but there was nothing Arctic could do to help them. Unbeknownst to Captain Luce and the crew of the Arctic, however, the Vesta's lifeboat had come up alongside the Arctic as the ship sped forward. It was pulled under the ship's starboard paddle wheel and was torn to pieces along with all but one of the occupants. The bodies of those in the lifeboat became stuck in the paddle wheel for several rotations.
Remember when I said this is the classic epitome? This is the example of just when you thought it couldn't get any worse. This is where it all begins. Sploosh ah, sploosh ah, sploosh ah. Right. But yeah, right, Kaiser. No, now Captain Luce was an absolute hero. Listen to Captain Luce's story as we go along. Nasty. No, not nasty yet. The description gets a little bit more graphic, but we're going to back this up. So yeah, this, as I said, is the classic example. This is the epitome. This is what happens when you say it just can't get worse. Here's where it starts to get worse.
Up alongside the Arctic as the ship sped forward. It was pulled under the ship's starboard paddle wheel and was torn to pieces along with all but one of the occupants. The bodies of those in the lifeboat became stuck in the paddle wheel for several rotations until they fell apart enough to fall out.
Yeah, they just basically cycled through here until their bodies were ripped apart and they just sort of fell out and became shark and turtle food. Ugh. Meanwhile, everybody's watching this happen. All of these people here are watching people get cycled through the paddles until they're just literally torn apart and fall off into the ocean.
This was one of the first rude awakenings of the afternoon that Arctic's passengers would witness.
Right? This is one of the first rude awakenings. Ladies and germs, we are just getting started with this accident.
This was one of the first rude awakenings of the afternoon that Arctic's passengers would witness. Sailors from the Arctic hauled the lone surviving Frenchman aboard. Arctic left the site of the accident behind, but efforts continued to mitigate the damage to the ship. The carpenter fashioned a bit of scaffolding over the side and attempted to plug the hole manually, and the captain ordered the shifting of weight away from the damaged starboard bow. The crew dragged...
Okay, so that was a great idea the captain had. We want to put the weight, we want to put the ballast, we want to put people, we want to put as much as we can over on the other side, so the ship will kind of tilt a little bit to maybe get some of the, there was the two holes below the waterline. Maybe raise those two holes above the waterline by shifting the weight to the other side of the ship. That was some really, really good, quick thinking on the master's part. Oh, my Lord in heaven, sweet baby Jeebus. Let's Go Brandon has just gifted 10 Legal Vices memberships. If you're one of the lucky people, Renee Collins, John Gordon, It's Happening with Harper, Len H, Chrissy, Silent PS, Aaron, Oceanway 007, Justin, Daniel, and Great Success received gifted memberships from Let's Go Brandon. All of you give him a super, super thank you for his generosity in gifting these memberships to you. Let's Go Brandon says it's time to make people green. Thank you so much, Let's Go Brandon. That was very generous of you to gift some of these people. And I swear to God, in the next couple of weeks, we will have a members only stream. I know I haven't done one for months because I'm an idiot, but I swear we will have one very, very soon. Yeah, so this was good thinking on the part of the men. Read the names again. Oh Lord, more 10 more memberships. 10 more memberships from Let's Go Brandon. Wow. What's going on here? Renee Collins. Okay, that's the first round. Where's the second round? The second round is Project Metal Music. Larry, Conan the Brobarian. Hey, Conan the Brobarian got one. Josh Chandler, Dog Mama, Billy Marie, Ghost 1878, Bifron, George Boney, and Vermillionaire received 10 gifted memberships from Let's Go Brandon. Again, all of you that just got those 10, give him a big shout out and a thanks. Thank you so much, Brandon, for your continued incredible generosity. Always appreciated. On with the show. Let's Go Brandon says, Baldo's in chat. If you think Jeff should actually follow through on doing a members only stream, I am. I will do one. There's a good chance it might happen this weekend. If not, it'll happen 2 weeks from now because this weekend is cool. Next weekend, the following weekend, I'll be hanging out with Meme Copium in Japan for the weekend. We're going to visit some cat girl cafes, but that's a totally different stream. Flux not wanting to be showing up has gifted 5 legal memberships. Oh my God, guys. Holy cow. Flux has gifted memberships to Renee Matei, King Ginger 333, Burdens of Proof. Oh my God. Burdens of Proof, Alicia G, Dean Kovacs, and Carol Belmore. But before that, we had Gigi Beauchamp, member for 1 month of the Clean and Sober Crew, saying, OMG, I can't imagine watching all this happen and not able to help. Now, Gigi, that's a thing. That's an important thing. And that's something we don't think about. We read these stories, we hear about these stories, we think, oh, that's a really horrible. But we don't really think that there are people that are literally watching people being fed through a paddle wheel until their bodies are ripped apart and shredded. Yeah, so there are real people that are really watching this happen. Just like I'm watching Dargy cause ear infections that cost me hundreds of dollars a month. Just a sec. Hi, I'm back. No, I wasn't calling you. I was telling you to stop doing that. All right. Oh, now she's feeling bad because I yelled at her. All right. On with the show.
Dragged the anchors and dumped them over the port side, letting them fall loose from the carpenter fashioned a bit of scaffolding over the side and attempted to plug the hole manually, and the captain ordered the shifting of weight away from the damaged starboard bow. The crew dragged the anchors and dumped them over the port side, torn to pieces, along with all but one of the occupants. The bodies of those in the lifeboat became stuck in the paddle wheel for several rotations until they fell apart enough to fall out. This was one of the first rude awakenings of the afternoon that Arctic's passengers would witness. Sailors from the Arctic hauled the lone surviving Frenchman aboard. Arctic left the site of the accident behind, but efforts continued to mitigate the damage to the ship. The carpenter fashioned a bit of scaffolding over the side and attempted to plug the hole manually, and the captain ordered the shifting of weight away from the damaged starboard bow. The crew dragged the anchors and dumped them over the port side, letting them fall loose from the ship, chain and all. The passengers were ushered to the aft port quarter, and indeed, the weight on the flooding section of the ship was eased.
So now we've created another situation. trying to lighten the ship, trying to get it to ride a little bit higher up in the water, they drop their anchors. They just let them go. Tons of weight taken off immediately. Everybody's supposed to go to the back, so it raises the front end of the ship a little bit. And so that was apparently helping a little bit. But we're just getting started with this particular adventure here. And let's go. Brandon has another. Is this the old? I think this is the unicorn sticker. I'm not sure. I've lost track. And Oceanway 007 said, "Thanks for all you do, Jeff. What do you feed your doggos?" The problem with English bulldogs is they're allergic to a lot of stuff, like grain products and things. They have high tendencies towards allergies. So do you cook their food? Sometimes I do if I want to give them a super special treat, but mostly I just give them like Costco's it's like salmon and sweet potato food. They seem to like that. And then just meat-based snacks, pig's ears. But you have to be careful with the pig's ears because like their jaws don't connect properly. So like with pig's ears and things, they get them all stringy and then they choke on them. So you have to be really, really careful and take them away when they get too stringy. But other little meat-based things like chicken wings, chicken necks, duck necks, things like that. That's mainly what they eat. Their Costco food and then the healthy meat-based snacks. Do they get sad when you leave? They don't give a shit about me. I think they do. Yeah. Mondays are my fave on this channel, but also like my ex-girlfriend who we were together and we were living together when we got the dogs. She'll come if I have to go out of town for business or travel or whatnot, she'll come over and take care of the dogs. So their mommy comes to visit them occasionally. So they're pretty good with that. I'm lucky to still, have a great relationship with her, and she loves the dog still, and she comes over and takes care of them. All right, that's the answer to the dog questions. Back to the disaster.
Unfortunately, however, the Arctic was not built with watertight bulkheads, so the water that had already come in was simply flowing aft with the shifted weight. The pumps continued to keep the influx at bay, but the ship was still slowly sinking. In addition to the main 4 steam bilge pumps, Arctic had hand pumps that had to be pumped manually. Passengers and crew alike worked these, taking short shifts until they were worn out from exhaustion, and the pumps were sticky with blood from their blistered hands. In an attempt to curb disorder in advance, the quartermasters were ordered to arm themselves and keep the passengers away from the lifeboats until the crew was ready to load them.
All righty, everybody reposition yourself, get settled in, because we're about to enter phase 2 of this accident. What can possibly go wrong when people know the ship is sinking and you start giving your crewmen guns to keep people away from the lifeboats? What could possibly happen when you give people guns to prevent panic? Don't panic, I've got a gun. How often does that really work out in life? Let's go, Brandon, with another $5 super chat. That's $150 in gifted memberships. Which could convert, who knows? But I don't even know how they convert the memberships. I don't even know. I have zero idea of what percentage of memberships I get. But it should still be counted towards the shots unless you hate your members. It's not that I don't hate membership or my members. It's just that I really like shots. So yeah, whatever. I can always do another red breast shot. Joe says, I mean, Lesko isn't wrong. Nah, what? Forcing me to have to have an adult beverage. Ow, twist my arm. Ow. Okay. Cheers for whatever reason. Thanks. All right. So we've distributed guns to prevent people from panicking. And that goes about as well as you think it would go. Oh, the mutiny is coming up later. The mutiny is coming up in a little bit. But yeah, the passing out guns to prevent people from panicking goes as well as you think it would go.
As Arctic cut through the fog, the ship's signal cannon was put to use as a makeshift distress call. A young man, an engineer named Stuart Holland, was tasked with regularly firing the signal cannon, a post that he would stand by until the very end. Water was nearing the boilers, and the stokers attempted to abandon their posts and the lower decks, but they were persuaded to stay there, knowing that at that moment, their best hope for survival was the steam for the engines. The ship may have had a full head of steam, but the lower she sank into the water, the more drag she had, and the less effect her paddles had in pushing her.
Now remember, they are steaming massively. They're at absolute the fastest speeds they can possibly muster under these conditions for Newfoundland, while they're trying to keep themselves. Oh my lord! Let's Go Brandon has again gifted 20 Legal Vices memberships. I hope I get a cut of this. I have no idea what YouTube does with memberships, but hey, cool. If not, that's why I never say, gee, thanks for me. I think thanks for the people that get gifted these memberships, because I literally have no idea what YouTube does with membership donations. Thank you so much. Now we're obligated. We will do a member stream this Saturday, I promise. Well, Saturday for me, Friday for you guys, maybe, or Sunday. I don't know. Sometime during the weekend we'll do a stream. I promise. Everybody, all the 20 of you that just got a subscription from Let's Go Brandon, give him a big thank you. Barney Yemum, I have no idea. I literally have no idea what YouTube does with membership stuff. I don't know. I understand very little of what happens. Let's Go Brandon says, neither do I. Now you're incentivized to figure it out. Well, Tank Rat was the king boss of memberships back in the day. He got me up to like 1,000 members at one point. John Gordon, thank you so much for the super chat. Do we know how far from land they are at this point? At this point, I don't know. Like when they started this mad dash for sure, when they started this mad dash for Newfoundland, they were about 4 hours away. So I would guess not too much time has passed since then. And to this day, we don't know where the wreck is. It hasn't been found for reasons that you'll see later. Like I said, we're just at the beginning of things that go wrong. We're just getting started here. Strap yourselves in and wait for more.
Forward. When the water reached the furnaces, the ship shook violently, as if a part of her had exploded. Arctic was losing power in her engines, and now only limped forward. Luce ordered the lifeboats loaded, starting with the aft starboard boat, the same boat that Second Officer Ballum was launching. It was loaded with women and children, and then provisions, and then put under the command of the ship's butcher. It was ordered to be loaded down to the waterline just above and stay there until every last lifeboat was ready to go. Luce wanted to launch all the lifeboats at the same time so that they could stay together after the ship goes down and make way for land as a group. However, here we see...
Okay, again, this is it. Let's Go Brandon says Tank Rat is a boss. Yeah, absolutely. This is another good decision you see on the part of Captain Luce. All of the ships fill with people. You put them at the waterline. You launch them all together because he knew the ship was going down. He knew at this point there was no chance of them reaching their goal. So he wants all the lifeboats to go in the water at the same time so that they can all stay together. So you don't launch one and have it drift off, launch another one, have it drift off. Keep them all together so that they can stay together and head for land together. Nicholas Starov, Union Rep, says, not Sunday. I have a combined birthday and weird Swedish holiday stream. Saint Valborg, patron saint for seamen. Easy jokes. Easy jokes. Not going to make him. What? Seaman rabies in Antwerpen. There is no saint that's in charge of seaman rabies in Antwerpen. I'm calling BS on that weird Swedish holiday stream. Marv White, I'm also curious how memberships work, but also how much of my YouTube Premium you get monthly. Also, we have found we haven't found the rec. Spoiler warning. Yeah, we haven't found the rec. The YouTube Premium is actually pretty good, because even if you have YouTube Premium and you don't have to watch the ads, I still get the ad revenue as if you had watched the ads. So yeah, YouTube Premium is a bonus for both of us. You don't have to sit through the insufferable ads that they put everywhere, and I still get paid as if you did have the ads. I mean, I get probably about $100 a month from YouTube Premium ads. So, that's about it. But it's good because you don't see the ads, and I get the ad revenues if you had seen them. I have YouTube Premium. Good. So do I. Because I don't know what it costs for everybody. For me, YouTube Premium is about $9 US here in Korea, and I don't have to sit through these stupid ads.
Our first serious act of mutiny.
All right, here we go.
Stay there until
now again, this goes back to the lifeboats. They wanted all the lifeboats to get settled down, ready to go together, so they all go in the water at the same time and they all stick together. And as the part-time historian has said, I'm thanks to Brandon, we're getting a little bit hazy here. The part-time explorer. Oh my Lord in heaven!
This is not a story for the faint of heart.
Why didn't it give me credit for where we've seen? Oh, I'm such a dick. Evolution Mutiny. There we go.
The aft port lifeboat, which was Captain Luce, who was the true villain for preventing.
Nope.
And not in any imminent danger of going to the lower decks, but they were persuaded to stay there, knowing.
God dang it.
In an attempt to curb disturbers, were ushered to the aft port.
All right, I think is where we are. This is whenever we find. Yeah, I totally boomered. Poppy. Whenever we get to where we need to be in this stream, we'll get to our first incident of mutiny. Because now we're getting into the things starting to go really bad.
Quarter, and indeed, the weight on the flooding section of the ship was easy, with blood from sisters regularly firing the signal cannon, a post that he.
This guy is a freaking hero, by the way. We'll talk more about him in a bit.
Would stand by until the very end, and there the ship shook violently, and stay there until every last lifeboat was ready to go. Luce wanted to launch all the lifeboats at the same time so that they could stay together after the ship goes down and make way for land as a group. However, here we see our first serious act of mutiny. Despite sound orders from the captain, and the ship was still stable and not in any imminent danger of going under, the butcher and his sailors cut the lifeboat's falls and quietly rowed off into the fog, leaving those on the ship behind.
Yeah. This is the first, mind you, the first incidence of mutiny. The butcher's like, y'all can stick around, but we're cutting out of here. We're gone later, peace out. And then they just kind of went off into the fog. This is Mutiny, Mr. Christian. Mutiny on the Bounty. What a great movie that was. 1962. What an amazing movie Mutiny on the Bounty was.
This lifeboat and its occupants were never seen again. The majority of the crew of the Ark.
Yeah, so there you go. Ha ha. The butcher, he sneaks off with the lifeboat full of people. But apparently they didn't make it because nobody ever heard from him again. See, this is what I mean by close cannibalism. Possible cannibalism. Did they get did they capsize? Did a wave take them out? Or did they just float around in the middle of the ocean until they all starved to death and ate each other to skeletons? We don't know because nobody ever heard from them again. They just disappeared into history. So whatever you're inclined to imagine happened to them, that's probably what happened. A rogue wave hit them and capsized them, or they ate each other. Whatever you want to imagine happened to these mutinous bastards. Your imagination is equally as justified as anyone else's imagination.
Were becoming increasingly self-centered and focused solely on their own survival rather than the orders of the captain. Luce found himself relying less on his crew and more on the male passengers. They moved across the deck to the aft port lifeboat and began loading it with women and children, but rogue crewmen began to rush it.
Oh, that's kind of a creepy thing here. There we go. All right. Now, the idea of women and children first hadn't been around for quite a while. I mean, but it was pretty well established at this point. So it's called the Birkenhead drill. After the case of we haven't talked about the Birkenhead. We should talk about the Birkenhead accident. But the Birkenhead incident, that's what solidified the idea of women and children first, that chivalric ideal, that concept amongst the Victorian and Edwardian commentators of, that's just what we men do. It's just this women and children first. This has only been around for like 10 years. Yeah, literally, this idea of women and children first had been around about 10 years by the time this accident happened. So it was a fairly new concept. We went from every man for themselves to women and children first. We're the chivalrous people. Well, this crew basically said, how long are we? We're at an hour and 27. I'll risk it once here for the sake of monetization. 10 years into the women and children first, this crew said, fuck it.
On the male passengers. They moved across the deck to the aft port lifeboat and began loading it with women and children, but rogue crewmen began to rush it. Axes were used in defense against them, but the rush of the men caused the forward tackle of the boat to fail and dump the women and children into the sea below.
So remember, we gave the crew guns. Now the armed crewmen are trying to take over the lifeboats, and the people in the lifeboats are using axes to defend themselves. And eventually all the women and children in the lifeboats get dumped into the ocean during the struggle for possession of the lifeboats.
Killing every last one of them. Some of the crew who stormed the lifeboat would survive the incident, and ironically later claimed that it was Captain Luce who was the true villain for preventing them from using the lifeboat.
Yeah, see, and this is, hey, what's up, Jess? Jess into chat. Y'all had one job and you effed it up. Let's go, Brandon. I'm not reading that, but that's funny. So yeah, this is the thing. Is like these people tried to vilify Captain Luce by saying he was a horrible leader, he was a horrible captain, he wouldn't let us use the lifeboats when he was trying to get the women and children in it, but the other guys were trying to mutiny and take over the lifeboats, which eventually ended up into the women and children, a lot of them getting dumped into the ocean and drowning, while the male crewmen, survived.
The last of the Arctic steam died off, and the ship drifted to a halt. Worse yet, the ship's steam pumps now gurgled to a stop. Aside from the small hand pumps, the sea was now free to fill without resistance. Fortunately, the ship was still sinking slowly. I'm only
obligated to read super chats.
Another lifeboat was prepared by Second Officer Ballum, as the aft port one was recovered and readied once more. Ballum's boat was lowered to the water and was briefly attached to the port paddle box before rowing away into the fog, abandoning the captain. Ballum had pretended to be so loyal up until this point, with the lifeboat less than half full and almost entirely comprised of crewmen, and with the ship still slowly sinking behind it.
So here we go. The next lifeboat also is full of crewmen. Yeah, Captain, we'll wait. Get everybody on here. Row, motherfuckers, row. And then they go off into the fog. So we have another example of the crewman commandeering a lifeboat and sailing and rowing off into the fog. Let's go, Brandon, $5 super chat. I'm going to obligate you into a member stream. No, I'll do it this weekend. One way or the other, I'll get it done. No worries. It's been too long. Miss K Grift, I really don't enjoy the word gurgle. How about moist? Do you like the word moist? How about moist and gurgly? All right, enough of that. Let's get back.
Balaam's boat began making way toward Newfoundland, despite Captain Luce yelling orders to them to stand by and wait to pick people up from the water. The aft port lifeboat, which was now recovered, was loaded with women and children, although not before an altercation broke out between the captain, armed with a mallet, and a sailor armed with a knife. Captain Luce won that one. Shortly after that,
so see, that's a badass captain. He's got a mallet, dude's got a knife. Captain wins with his mallet over the knife. So captain's a pretty badass, decent dude.
The lifeboat was once again stormed by cowardly men.
But it doesn't do any good because, again, the crewmen overtake the lifeboat.
Shortly after that, though, the lifeboat was once again stormed by cowardly men, many of them tripping over themselves and falling into the sea. The boat fell free and some of the men climbed aboard. It drifted off into the fog, leaving behind the Arctic and their honor. The Duke of Gramont from France, who was mentioned earlier and traveling.
Now, I told you he would become a figure of interest, a figure of suspicion and potential ridicule as this went on. Because remember, there was a French duke on board this ship. So this is his story here. And Ocean Away 007 says, I'm not a flat earther. Don't worry, lol. But why is it so hard to sail around Antarctica? What are they protecting / hiding? Well, if you want the scientific answer, one, ice. Ice makes it really difficult. I'm dealing with a case now where some octopus, some squid catchers, some squid fishing boats. They loaded up another boat that went a little bit too far south and hit some ice and disappeared. So ice is the big problem. Or if you want the less scientific rational answer, go and watch, I can't remember what it was, but one of my old unexplained streams, we talked about Nazi secret. No, we can't say that yet. It's only an hour and 32 minutes in. We have to do it with the Churchill pronunciation. The Nazi UFO bases in Antarctica. So if you want to go hear about the Arctic UFO bases for the Nazis and some of the searches that were done back in the day, go back and watch some of my unexplained streams. Interesting theory. It's kind of like the moon. I think it was Shepard. Was it Shepard that said the question isn't, whether or not we faked the moon landing? The question is, why aren't we going back? But yeah, will do. Thank you. Yeah, go back and watch something. I wish I could remember which unexplained stream it was, but Flux was there. We talked about some UFO bases and things.
As a diplomat, leapt over the side and made it into a lifeboat. His survival would actually become a controversy that hung over his head for the rest of his life. A special thanks, by the way, to Frank Jastrzemski for sending me this original photo card of the Duke of Gramont. There were supposedly 2 lifeboats left, and Luce directed his attention to getting them ready. They were smaller ones than the ones that had already gotten away, but to Luce's horror, he found that one of the last lifeboats had already been hijacked by Arctic's chief engineer, who gathered his friends, provisions, boxes of cigars, and the ship's pistols.
Well, okay. The crew took over the last lifeboat. But, they did save the cigars. So, women and children, cigars, that's a really hard choice to make. Not saying which way I would lean, but cigars don't yell at me. Cigars give me pleasure. Cigars don't take half of my earnings when I divorce them. Sorry, just kidding. Yeah. Literally, it was the crewman with cigars and guns saying, hasta la vista to the women.
And quietly snuck away with the boat while attention was focused on the aft lifeboat. As his boat crept away, they even refused to pick swimmers up from the water who were near them and attempting to climb aboard, even though their boat was only partially full. This was a gut punch to Captain Luce. 5 of the ship's lifeboats were already gone, and not a single woman or child had been safely away yet. The families of Edward Collins, George Allen, and James Brown were all still on board, as was Captain Luce's son, Willie.
And see, that's an important thing. The rich, the truly wealthy, the important people, even the captain himself, their families stayed on this ship. Say what you want to say, they were still on that ship.
And almost all of his officers, engineers, and sailors had abandoned him. With one lifeboat left, Captain Luce decided the best course of action now was to construct a raft from removable parts on the ship and use the last lifeboat as a platform in the water. The spars were removed from the masts, doors were taken off of their hinges, and any of the debris that could be found was brought to the lowest point on the deck.
See, again, this is an amazing thing that the captain of this ship is doing. Captain Luce he's taking apart the ship to try to make as many rafts as possible for the people on the ship. He's trying to build things that will float to save as many of these crew members as he can, because the piece of shit crewmen have all taken off with all of the lifeboats. Kudos to the captain for keeping his head about him and organizing this effort.
The aft port side of the ship to be assembled into a raft. Yes, the damage had been done on the starboard bow, but the weight of the passengers and crew shifted the free-flowing water to the stern. And now she was going down in that direction. The raft was...
personally, I would have shot everybody on that lifeboat and taken the cigars and then got the women and children. So it would be just me, a boat full of women, and a bunch of cigars. Just saying, that's kind of the way you want to go.
Was the last hope for those on board. But at this point, those left on the Arctic split into 3 distinct camps. Those who were loyal to Captain...
See, listen to this. Listen to this excrement here. The ship is sinking. Literally everyone is going to die unless they all pull their crap together and organize a way out of this. In this extreme situation, they're all in extremis. And there's still factions forming. There's still little groups. There's still little cliques that are forming in the middle of this crisis.
Was left on the Arctic split into 3 distinct camps. Those who were loyal to Captain Luce, who made every effort to save others and construct a means of escape. The second group were mostly female passengers, including the Collins and Brown family, who accepted their fate and quietly prayed, appealing to God for salvation. And those in the third group, who seemed to appeal to the devil. The third group broke into the liquor cabinet and drank themselves stupid.
Up to this point, can you really fault him? Can you really fault him for going, we're going down, we may as well get liquored up and enjoy the last few minutes? Can you really fault him up to this point? Cigars on a boat sounds like my Swedish chief engineer. Well, I wouldn't want to be on a boat without cigars, but that's just me. Or the whiskey. You can't. A lot of ships you can't drink. But so far, okay, fine. We're going down. We may as well get liquored out of our damn minds and kind of forget it all. But, well, Well, see, if you get really super drunk, you don't care. You have fun. But unfortunately, they took it a little too far. And here we go with yet another example of just when you thought it couldn't get any worse.
They looted for salvation. And those in the third group, who seemed to appeal to the devil. The third group broke into the liquor cabinet and drank themselves stupid. They looted what they could. They violently began taking life jackets from others. Now the worst of this group saw this as an opportunity to do what they wanted with no consequences, and attempted to rape the women.
Yeah.
There were almost certainly
attempted to cough the women on board. Yeah, that's not okay. No, not a bar fight. Huge ass. Much worse. It's like, okay, this is our last chance. We're all going to die. We may as well just do whatever we want. And they decided in the last moments of their life to start attempting to grape people. I told you it just gets worse. We're not over yet. I wish I was drunk. How are we, lads and lasses? Hope all is well. I wish I was drunk. We are. We've just had an amazing Irish Storm cocktail. We are sipping on Redbreast 12. It is all in your honor. I wish I was drunk. It's an Irish night here on Maritime Monday. Thank you so much for the super chat. Okay, let's get back to the degeneracy on board the Arctic.
Killings among these final minutes. So this group saw this as an opportunity to do what they wanted with no consequences, and attempted to rape the women. There were almost certainly killings among these final minutes, as the people brawled, and as the few remaining gentlemen aggressively defended the women. Arctic, which had been resisting its fate for over 4 hours now, was beginning to lose its stability. It was lurching, rolling, and heaving as it dropped deeper into the sea. There were indeed heroes as the ship entered its final moments, despite the terrible actions of some. Fourth Officer Francis Dorian stood loyally by Captain Luce until the very end, defending the lifeboat being used in the raft's construction and ensuring that it was not stolen away. The engineer apprentice Stuart Holland was still firing the signal cannon in hopes that they'll be heard, and he'd go down with the ship doing this.
I told you we would get back to this guy. This whole guy's duty was to be the SOS guy, to just fire the shots to try to attract other people. And he did it until he died. He stood at his post. He maintained his post and continued to fire that cannon until the end of his life.
His supposed last words were to the captain, asking him to let the world know that at least one man stood by his post.
Good on you,
One of the
mate.
ship's two stewardesses, a woman named Anna Downer, was still working one of the ship's hand pumps, with blood dripping down her arms and down the stem of the pump and staining the deck. Captain Luce told her that she actually could leave her post and that there was no use working those pumps anymore. The ship was sinking too fast. But she said that as long as her arms still worked, she would stand by that pump.
Good for her.
She went down with the ship.
As the raft was nearly completed, that group of vile passengers turned their attention from the vices still aboard the ship and rushed onto the raft, trampling those still building it. Some of those rushing the raft were struck down by axes, but the raft broke free from the ship with several on it. Fourth Officer Dorian's boat was also finally overtaken by the ruffians.
With every means of escape now exhausted, Captain Luce did his final rounds.
He said goodbye to his passengers, spending a moment specifically with the families of Collins, Brown, and Allen, handing out life belts to all along the way. The children of these families clung to their mothers, crying as they all began to pray. Finally, Captain Luce went to his son's cabin. He was laying in the bed, ill, and he walked him up to the bridge. Captain Luce.
Russell, thank you so much for the super chat. Says Lawrax, you are truly amazing. What a dude, down with the ship. Hope the captain went down as well. That's a sad story, which we're going to get to right here. This is the part in the story where we get to the sad part. Let's go. Brandon says, are you more of a grape juice or a grapefruit person? Grapefruit person. Moving right along. Yeah, this is Captain Loose. This is his story. It's kind of, I mean, not kind of, it's really damn sad.
Began to pray. Finally, Captain Loose went to his son's cabin. He was laying in the bed, ill, and he walked him up to the bridge. Captain Loose saw no chance for survival for either of them, and expected that he and his son would quietly wait there for the end. The Arctic dropped by the stern, tearing apart the deck house and sinking fast. Passengers still aboard were thrown in a heap against the funnel as Stuart Holland fired off his final cannon signal.
Mm.
The ship groaned as her lower decks were blown through and her bow lifted up into the air.
$300 people, at least. Closer to 320 gone. Not a single woman or child survived this accident. The vast majority of those that survived.
Captain Loose held his son in his arms as he was pulled deep under the water, struggling. Captain Loose held his son in his arms as he was pulled deep under the water, struggling to surface. He finally did, but was pulled under once more. He lost grip of his son when he resurfaced. In the chaos above the wreck site, he did manage to find his son at a distance and began swimming towards him. During the collision, the Vesta had banged into the Arctic's starboard paddle box, completely destroying her forward guard and damaging the rest of the housing. Now, when the Arctic struck the sea floor, that paddle box broke away from the wreck and shot up to the surface, striking and killing several struggling in the sea, including Captain Loose's son. Captain Loose was hit badly in the head by the box, but regained himself and, covered in blood, climbed atop the wooden structure as a raft. A few others.
So there we go. The very object that saved the captain's life killed his son. I mean, you've got no words for that. The paddle wheel bumper that saved the captain's life killed his son. Jimmy Cobb asks, how quickly did the ship sink? Several hours it took.
Climbed atop with him, including George Allen of the Novelty Ironworks. From the paddle box, they watched in horror as those in the water slowly died around them. There were some in the group of 12 on the box that watched their own family drown in front of them.
They tried to grab them, but the sea was so rough that they drifted away. They watched the Allen and Brown family climb aboard a raft and slowly die there. The ship was gone, but the horrors were not over.
Yeah, so even the bankers, the important investment banker types that supported this, the VIPs on the ship, they went down as well. They lost their lives.
A gale began to pick up, and the blood in the water attracted sharks, who dragged off some of the stragglers as the group began to spread apart.
Yeah. Zeno the Stoic. Yeah. I mean, for Christ's sake, you've got all this going on. The crew mutinying, the guys with the guns throwing the women and children overboard, commandeering the lifeboats, the ship going down, the paddle wheel bumper floating up, killing a bunch of people, including the captain's son, people getting caught in the paddle wheel and torn to pieces. The investors, the VIPs dying as well. And on top of that, the sharks show up. Again, this is a just when you think it can't get any worse situation. bucking sharks show up. The ship did not have enough life rafts. It was not required to back then. So it really took the Titanic accident for them to increase the number of mandatory lifeboats. So I believe it was 75%. I could be totally wrong, but I somehow seem to recall it was 75% of the crew. I mean, 75% of capacity. You had to have lifeboats to cover that much. But back when this accident happened, that was not it. There was nowhere near enough lifeboats to cover all of the passengers because they weren't required to. So yeah, the sharks come.
Night fell. Throughout the next day, more people died off, and the dozen who were standing aboard the paddle box were now down to 3 survivors: Captain Luce, George Allen, and the sailor who actually pulled the Frenchman from Vesta's lifeboat out of the sea.
On that day, the Canadian bark Huron, en route to Quebec, found 4th Officer Dorian's boat and picked up 30-some people from it. The Huron also found the large improvised raft from just before the ship's final plunge, drifting in pieces with only 1 survivor still aboard it, whom they rescued as well. Something interesting happened next. Shortly after, the Huron came across another ship called the Lebanon en route to New York, and it linked up with it and gave the survivors aboard the Huron the opportunity to hop aboard and just sail directly into New York rather than stick with the Huron and go into Quebec and then make their way down to America from there. The survivors of the Arctic, who acted nobly during the sinking, chose to go with the Lebanon just straight to New York and head home. The ones who acted a little bit more cowardly stuck with the Huron and went to Canada, perhaps anticipating a very negative reception given their actions during the sinking.
Yeah, the bastards that did all the horrible crap, they just ran away to Canada.
And they went with the Huron back to Canada and stayed there for the rest of their lives.
Ugh.
The paddle box drifted for days. Ships sailed through the area, but did not.
Now, mind you, this is drifting for days. No food, no water. Only 3 people left alive on that paddle box. Again, close to cannibalism.
Not notice them. The sailor among them even attempted suicide twice, being driven mad by the sea, but was stopped by Captain Luce and George Allen. They were eventually picked up by the Cunard steamer Cambria, who picked up a small handful of other survivors from the sea, including the French fishermen pulled aboard the Arctic from the Vesta. Cambria was under the command of a Captain Russell. Now, even though he worked for Cunard, the arch nemesis of the Collins Line, he felt a personal gratitude towards the Collins Line. Captain Russell was a survivor of the wreck of the bark Jesse Stevens, which sank in a storm, and 16 of her crew were rescued by the Collins liner Pacific. Indeed, it is a small world, and Captain Russell saw this as a sentimental payback for the debt that he personally felt towards the Collins Line for saving his life a few years.
Yeah, so I mean, how is that? The captain of the ship that saved this captain was rescued by another ship owned by the same owners as the captain he was rescuing. There's a lot of accidents that happened back in the day. Let's Go Brandon says, I think there should be drinking for this members only stream. Of course there will be. Maybe a whiskey review is in order. Sure, why not? Yes, I know people are drowning. Poor timing. Yeah, why not?
Years prior.
Out on the open ocean, 2 of the lifeboats continued to row west. One of them was the one commanded by Second Officer Ballum, and the other was the lifeboat hijacked by the ship's engineers.
2 days after the wreck, the boats finally made landfall at Broad Cove, Newfoundland, today known as Renew's Kappa Hayden. They rested here and caught their bearings, and then journeyed 50 miles north to St. John's.
When they reached the city, they were met with a startling sight. The Vesta, safely in port, with her bow torn off.
What? What? The Vesta, the other ship that was sinking, didn't sink and got to port before they did. What's up with that? Remember, it had the ability to block off sections of the ship to prevent the water from sinking it?
Despite the serious damage to her, her watertight bulkheads held, and her crew managed to astoundingly bring her into port safely. Up until this point, Vesta did not know that the Arctic herself was sinking, but merely thought that the collision was a hit and run. And word of this selfish hit and run was already circulating, with Captain Luce being portrayed around the world as a villain. Only when the survivors started trickling in was it known that the Arctic fled for her own life.
Yes, I mean, how crappy was that? How crappy was that? That the Captain Luce was doing all of this stuff to save his crew members, to save the passengers. Not much of it worked. None of it worked actually because of the freaking mutiny of the crewmen. But he was being vilified and you know, for hitting another ship and running away. Ah, this poor captain. Yikes. Let's go. Brandon says, Jeff, you best get drinking now as well. We're coming to the end here. We've had a bit to drink this evening. Kyle Davis, Legal Vices. Have you seen the news from San Diego about two Navy vessels having a very near collision? Very interesting. Yeah, I was talking about that at the beginning of the show here. We watched the video of that maybe 1 or 2 months ago. I think it was in December it happened. I can't remember when it happened, but we watched the video a couple of months ago. But they've just released the final report. I think it's the final initial report on what happened. We're going to be talking about that next week. That will be next week's Maritime Monday stream. Is the breakdown of what happened for the if you haven't seen it, it was on one of our random just like reaction video streams. But yeah, two Navy boats came pretty darn close to hitting each other in San Diego. We watched the video, we reacted to it, but we're going to do a full breakdown of it next week. Thank you for mentioning that, Kyle Davis. That's next week's Maritime Monday.
Now, to speculate for a moment, a lot of people might suggest that if only the Arctic had stayed with the Vesta, she might have been able to evacuate her passengers and crew onto the Vesta, and then they all could have made it back safely to Newfoundland.
Yeah.
I don't...
Who would have thought that was a possibility? The ship that was obviously sinking probably, maybe, possibly could have saved everybody else.
Crew onto the Vesta, and then they all could have made it back safely to Newfoundland. I don't believe that was the case. The Vesta was hanging on by a thread. In fact, for several hours after the collision, her crew believed they were going to sink. It was truly a miracle and a testament to their seamanship that they were able to save the ship and bring her back into port. But the added weight of 400 plus people from the Arctic climbing aboard the Vesta, I believe, would have been too much weight for the ship to sustain. I mean, on the Arctic, we see that they were able to shift the entire angle and direction that the ship was going down by just by all standing on the opposite side of the ship. The weight of 400 people on the Vesta would have been significant, and I don't believe that the ship would have actually survived that much additional weight. Officer Ballum chartered 2 ships once they arrived in St. John's.
Children.
One to bring the survivors back to America, and one to head back out to the wreck site under his command and look for survivors. But they found none.
Numbers will vary from source to source, but approximately 88 survived the sinking of the Arctic, to a loss of 320, including every last woman and child.
News of the disaster didn't reach the United States until 2 weeks later, on October 10th, when the rumors of the sinking were finally confirmed by survivors, including Captain Luce. As more survivors coming in from Canada arrived in the country, the grim details of the sinking began emerging, and the cowardice of some was identified. When Officer Ballum was questioned as to why he took the lifeboat away from the ship, he carefully spun the story to instead condemn Captain Luce.
Yeah, this is some shit here. This is yeah.
Many of the firemen who forced their way onto the raft and lifeboats also condemned Captain Luce, claiming he was incapable of leading and had poor judgment. Of course, this was mainly to defer judgment away from themselves. Luce did actually blame himself for some of the events of that afternoon. First and foremost, the abandonment of Chief Officer Gorley, who had taken the lifeboat from the Arctic over to the Vestas to see what help could be given, and was left behind in the mad dash by the Arctic to make it to land. He felt guilt for leaving him behind, for their lifeboat was never seen again, and he speculated that Officer Gorley could have helped maintain better discipline during the evacuation. He also felt certain that his friend was cursing his name in his final moments. Either way, Captain Luce never returned to the sea. No formal inquiry was held, perhaps because the politicians in Washington felt that it would make them look bad
Yep.
for being behind the excessive speed policy, even though they continued to mandate it for the Collins Line, even after the loss of the Pacific a few years later.
Edward Collins, the owner of the Collins Line, had just lost half of his family in the sinking and would never be the same again. Same goes for James Brown, who lost 6 family members, and for George Allen of the Novelty Iron Works, who witnessed firsthand his wife and baby die, but still he himself survived. All 3 of these men would suffer from severe depression for the rest of their lives.
How did Cunard react to the news that their competitor had lost the Arctic and the wave of grief that fell over New York City and the rest of the United States? Well, they had a parade. Yes, I'm not making that up. They had a parade.
Yeah. How jacked up is that? The competitors had a parade to celebrate the sinking of their competitor's ship.
Right down New York City only a couple of days later to celebrate and advertise the safety and security of their lifeboats.
The Vesta sailed until 1875, when she sank off of Spain. There are no known plans or images of the Vesta, with the exception of this rudimentary sketch published immediately after the collision showing her broken in bow. So the depiction that we created for this documentary was based mostly off of that sketch and written descriptions.
Yeah, so the Vesta again eventually sank somewhere. It seems to be the end of a lot of ships is sinking. Brandon says, I know how to fix this. Sadly, I can't participate when I am in my office proper, but today I'm in my home office and now Jeff is dodging shots. Do the right thing, Jeffrey. Pony up on those shots. Lies. All lies. I did a double shot for you. You suggested the $150 shot. I did that. I have done them all, plus my original cocktail. As I said, it's not like you have to twist my arm or anything. We're nowhere near another one, but I'm going to do one anyway, just because why the hell not? James Brown was on that thing. Was that what inspired? This is a man's world. No, different one. Cheers.
The wreckage of the Arctic was never found. She lies somewhere off the east coast of Newfoundland, likely with very little to mark the spot on the seafloor where she fell, as her wooden body will mostly have disintegrated. There may be a singular relic from the sinking somewhere that was picked up from the water, but nothing much. The bodies were not recovered, and the name Arctic was avoided by shipping lines in the years to come. White Star Line considered naming one of the oceanic fleet the Arctic, but opted to name it the Celtic.
Yeah, that's like nobody wants to be known as the Arctic. You'll notice that like right about the mid 1900s, nobody named their child Adolf anymore. Jezebel isn't a great name for a woman anymore. Things happen and you just kind of don't want to perpetuate it.
After they were reminded of this story. There are no proper memorials. This is an era of ships that has mostly been forgotten, and a company of ships buried in history, and a complement of passengers and crew whose story has little been told.
I want to thank David Shaw for his outstanding book, The Sea Shall Embrace Them, without which this video wouldn't have been possible. And also thank you to my buddy Liam Sharp, who put together these animations with me, and also his additional research contributing towards this project.
A huge thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon for helping cover the costs of these rather large Collins Line documentaries, especially Kaiser Wilhelm II, Airwicka, Zach Starosu, Tom Shavada, Rob M., Amos Mayhew, Corey Andrews, Dakota Charbone, Zolt Bognar, and Nicholas Masella. If you enjoyed this video and want to support my ongoing research into maritime stories and lost history, please consider becoming a patron yourself at the link below. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you very much for taking this time to learn about this disaster.
That's from Part-Time Explorer. You absolutely want to go subscribe to Part-Time Explorer. The link is down below. The link to this video without my commentary is also down below. please consider going over there, letting him know that I sent you there, that you appreciate his work in preparing this video, the blood, sweat, and tears he put into it so that we can continue our education. Let him know that you appreciate it. I would appreciate you letting him know you appreciate it. Part-time Explorer. He's got some great videos here. And I said there's a substantial maritime bend to this, some Titanic stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's a great place. He's got some great videos. The main videos here again, we got the underwater explanation, the Peter Iredale, the SS United States, the Marie Celeste. We can never get enough of Marie Celeste. We'll be talking about that again around Halloween. The full story of the Eastland. We talked about the Eastland there in Chicago. And stay tuned. Someone, somewhere on the internet is going to be doing something. Just stay tuned for the Eastland. The ship that flew, all kinds of cool maritime stuff here on this channel. So go there, check him out, subscribe, like the video, and leave him a good old comment. Still no SS Minnow video. At some point. Yes, we did the Concordia. Go to my playlist. I have a playlist for Maritime Monday. The Concordia will be there. Nicholas Tarov, there's a lot of Eva Braun misogyny. Well, there's some Avas, but I'm not sure there's an Eva Braun out there. All right. Let's see. Do the right thing, Jeffrey. Pony up on those shots. Oh, I did. Well, that one you poured for free. So let's reset this counter. Hit it, DJ Khaled. Another one. Now, at the end of this Maritime Monday show, I do have to make a confession. Those of you that follow me, watch me, particularly like the F at Friday streams or the other streams we do, I've always prided myself on the fact that in 53 years on planet Earth, I have never thrown up from being drunk. I've never done it. I always prided myself on that. Well, for the record, as of last Saturday night, I can no longer say that. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Ian Mack, James. Oh, we already read that one. All righty, everybody. Yeah, that's Maritime Monday for today. Thank you so much for being here. Coming up, we've got a couple of things that I want to mention before we get going. This is a little bit of a grift. Why not? Go if you're interested in getting some amazing LawTuber cards. Go to, let me bring this up here. I need to bring this up. getlawcards.com/vices. getlawcards.com/vices. Bringing that up. Boom. This is what we're looking at with law cards. All of your favorite LawTubers and LawTube adjacent people. Farmhand Tom is putting together this amazing deck of cards. They're trading cards, just like you find like Topps baseball cards, basketball cards, Pokemon cards, whatever. They're all on that same professional stock card that you would expect from a high quality collector's item trading card. We have, I mean, literally everybody is here. Steve Gosney, Megan Fox, Law of Self-Defense, me. I get the big giant arrow pointing right at me. We've got Danny on direct over there. We've got Rackets and Mrs. and Lady Rackets. We've got Upside Down, Aussie Overlord, Good Logic. Steph the Alter Nerd is over here. What are they? They're trading cards that feature your favorite law streamers from Mercada, Gosney, DeBronca, Vices, Mindset, Good Logic, and many, many more. Each pack contains 5 random cards. They're $10 for a pack of 5. And you can get the full set of 120 cards, I believe it is. And there's randomly signed cards we put in. Farmhand Tom has sent a bunch of cards, like 40 to 50 cards, he said, for me to sign. They'll be randomly put into random packages. You'll get the law cards. You'll get some of you'll be lucky and get the Legal Vices autographed cards. Why the hell you would want one of those is completely and utterly beyond me. I don't know. But we have a Maritime Monday card right here. We've got Fuck It Friday. Can we say? Hey, we can say that. We're 2 hours and 9 minutes. We've got a Fuck It Friday card. We've got a general card. And eventually I'm going to have my own entire pack of cards. But we want to go there and you want to get these cards. If you go to buy here, it tells you what you've got. There's the several different tiers. What's included? Randomly inserted signature cards. There's Nick Rekieta, Andrew Bronca, Legal Vices, Steve Gosney, Good Logic, and Megan Fox. However, other signed cards will be added. Other Law Streamer cards. Danny On, Flux. Yes, I forgot. Flux has her own cards. Steph, the Alternator, the DUI guy, Ozzy Overlord, Camelot, and many, many other. Camelot got some fat milk. Can't see you guys here. And if you go here, the QR code, this QR code right here, if you scan that QR code, it'll take you to the fat milk recipe. You don't want to miss that Camelot fat milk recipe. And if you've ever watched Camelot, you know that's a really goddamn good impression I just did of Camelot. And there's other cards. There's tons of other cards. There's a 10-pack, a 15-pack, and a 24-pack. These are so cool. It's just a random kitschy thing. You know, it's just it's a gag gift. It's something you want to do. I've already ordered my own 24-pack just so I can have every single card that's been issued because I think they're funny as hell. I think they're great. And again, Jeff steals his members' money while dodging shots. I hereby demand a free signed law card, or there will be hell to pay the next effing Friday. You are hammered, by the way. Love, Brandon. I'm just getting started. I'm nowhere near hammered. I'm having a lot of fun. And this is breaking news. Again, this is at getlawcards.com/vices. There's a new card. This has just been issued. Right here, this is it. Doggo Cam. We've got the Doggo Cam card right there. Strawberry and Yoda have made the getlawcards.com/vices. If you're one of the lucky ones, you'll get a Strawberry and Yoda card. This was just added today. So, Farmhand Tom, thank you so much for adding the Doggo Cam card to the Legal Vices rando cards. Again, it's just a fun thing. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't, you don't. You know, whatever. Just go to getlawcards.com/vices and you can get your own random cards. And if you're one of the lucky ones, you might get a signed Legal Vices card. But again, why you would even want one, I can't imagine. But there'll be 40 or 50 of them out there for those of you that do. All right, that's kind of it. That's everything we got planned. That's everything we got lined up. The doggos are sleeping except for Yoda, Yoda's asleep. Dargy seems to be chewing on her foot. You want that as a poster? Kim Potter got released the other day. Congratulations to her, and she looks awful. I mean, it's sad. 16 months in prison wreaked havoc on that woman's soul. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. I think we've got everything. We've got everything. We've got everything. That was Monday, Maritime Monday today. Please like and subscribe to the video. Let's look at our poll here. Got to bring up the poll. 17% of you said you had a sinking feeling that told you forgot to hit the like and subscribe. 20% said yes, it was a titanic decision. 27% said okay, paint me like a French Lorax. And 35% of you said I'm the liker and subscriber now. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll see you tomorrow for something. We're probably going to do a reaction to Judge Manning streams. You don't want to miss that. Lorax saying thank you, chat. Thank you, mods. Thank you, all of you generous super chatters. Thank you, all of you people that have subscribed. Help me get back up to 36,000. Love you all. Until tomorrow, take care and enjoy your legal vices. Lorax out.